Hi, Matt Brown again here with the TBI post. Today I want to talk about something that maybe doesn't always get correlated. It's two conditions that overlap each other. I happen to have both myself, and I'm sure a lot of you as well suffer from the same conditions. And that is, not only do you have PCS, post concussion syndrome, um, or CTE, the brain injury, TBI, whatever you want to call it. They have so many different names for it, but it's a brain injury. So you have a brain injury, but you've also been diagnosed with post traumatic stress syndrome. So you have PTSD and you have CTE, TBI, PCS, whatever. And if you look them up, you'll notice that there's a lot of overlapping symptoms, a lot of things um, kind of, if you take two circles and in between the center of those two inner circle, there's a list of things in there that overlap, that are they're identical to each other, and it's unfortunate that when you suffer from both, that it's hard to tell which symptom is from what condition. Um, a lot of people think PTSD, that's only for the military. Um, and while that is the majority of the sufferers, that's really not it's not really accurate that's only for soldiers. It happens to police officers. It happens to firefighters. It happens to women of domestic abuse. In fact, more women that are involved in domestic abuse situations have both PTSD and TBIs, and people kind of forget about that. They don't consider that uh, when they're thinking of who suffers from this, who gets this, who's primarily affected by this. Um, Now, my PTSD happened as a police officer. My brain injuries, though, were a compilation of multiple concussions over a 30-year period. So the two had nothing to do with each other. Um, in fact, I didn't even know I had PTSD. I denied it for years. I just didn't, because I was of the same opinion. I'm not a soldier. I was never shot at. I was never involved in any. So I've seen dead people. I've seen blood and guts. Who hasn't? I've seen traumatic things, car accidents, and who hasn't? So for me, it was my injury that I received while I was a police officer, and I denied it. I denied it for many years that I had any PTSD from that. But I ended up losing my career. Before age 30, I was a detective, and it was all gone. I lost everything: my job, my take home car, my benefits, my badge, my retirement. Everything was gone. The only thing I got was medical coverage for my injury, and a lump sum, and that's it. And the lump sum, believe me, was not not even half of my yearly salary. So, what I really want to discuss, though, is I have the brain injuries as well. So, those multiple concussions, I've had over 20 concussions, has caused physical damage to my brain, which affects things psychologically as well as physically. And my thyroid doesn't work because my pituitary gland got damaged. I suffer from anxiety and depression and irritability, and so do people with PTSD, and so do people with brain injuries. So there's different triggers. There's different things that you know are you could say this is definitely PTSD related. Flashbacks, for example, nightmares, whatever. That's PTSD without a doubt. Um, but the anxiety and depression could be both. Um, my fine motor skills, my cognition, uh, those physical balance issues and things of that nature, my spatial awareness, that's brain injury. Um, but there's some things that I have that really could be either or both, and there's really no way to know. Um, so really, what I wanted to say was you're not alone in that, and don't forget about our battered women out there. Um, you know, Thank God for our soldiers and our police officers and firefighters and first responders and everybody who's out there doing what they're doing, putting their life on the line, and paying the price for it, both physically and mentally. We need to look out for them, absolutely, without a doubt. But let's not forget about our battered women, our domestic abuse victims, who are also suffering from the exact same things, and they're not being looked at as the same way, um, just because they weren't overseas in a war, or they weren't wearing a badge and involved in first response or anything like that, doesn't mean that they haven't seen and been traumatized. They've been beaten and abused, most of their lives. They're caught in a vicious cycle where they're cut off from society, their family, their friends. They're dealing with concussion issues that they didn't even know they had. From the abuse, they are dealing with trauma and PTSD, which they probably don't know they have. And because people will say, well, why do you stay with them? Why do you go back to them? Why do you? Well, you don't understand what's going on inside their brain. Something is definitely different. They're different people. Domestic abuse really takes a hold of somebody emotionally and physically. So I could never judge, somebody who's been domestically abused or is abusive. I've never hit a woman. I would never hit a woman. I don't know what it's like to be in an abusive relationship. I've never been hit. So that being said, I've been around it enough in my professional career. I was a crime victims advocate. I was a criminal investigator. I'm a certified rape crisis counselor. I've seen enough. I know enough that these women are dealing with both PTSD and brain injuries, and a lot of them are going undiagnosed, unnoticed, because people aren't correlating the trauma that they go through. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Um, you know, thank God for our soldiers and our first responders, and the EMTs, the police, and the firefighters. You know they are up against the wall every day, and it seems like more and more people are against them every day, and that's unfortunate. And but I also want to remind everybody, let's not forget about our domestic abuse victims as well, the children and the wives and girlfriends who come from abusive situations, they're struggling too. They have the same symptoms, they're dealing with the same issues, and they're not getting the attention that the rest of us, are getting with those of us that have played sports. I've played football, so it's they knew pretty quickly that my concussions, were a result, or my issues were a result of concussions received mostly during sports. The PTSD was found out through my psychiatrist, as a result of my injuries as a police officer. Um, and those things are pretty expected. You forget about the poor woman who has 3 kids, no job, can't take care of herself, has been cut off from her family and friends, and is constantly being abused and threatened, and emotionally and physically traumatized on a daily basis from her spouse or her boyfriend or whatever the situation may be. Um, let's not forget about them. Let's treat them the same as you're treating, the soldiers that are coming home and suffering, and the police officers and firefighters and football players who are suffering from these injuries. These women are suffering the same as we are, and they need just as much help as we do. So um, that's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to talk about the comparison. They're 2 different conditions, but they do overlap, and they do exist. They are real. They are verifiable. Um, so let's just get people the help that they need, and don't forget about our women and children as well. Thanks.